There's something funny that happens with the raw materials sometimes. We have a situation here in Mozambique, for example, that we grow cotton, and then it gets processed into thread in a factory here in Marraquém. But then it goes to Portugal, and it becomes textile in Portugal, and then it comes back as textile. So this is the problem. The problem isn't so much that we don't have the raw material, is that we don't have the infrastructure to process, to add value to this raw material, and that's what it's missing. We need to concentrate on the different stages of the supply chain and say, okay, where is the most value? So where should the most effort be put in?
All right. Given now that context, your company, how are you handling that conversation? How diverse is your portfolio?
To be fair, our company has decided to start with something which is a bit more powerful than just focusing on the raw material. We've decided to focus on changing the narrative first. We've decided to focus on making people aware that there are other things, there are other types of African textiles, that it's not just wax, that there is cloth made in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Mali, in South Africa. And once you do that, then people start to get interested in this, because we're not going to change the market overnight. The first thing we have to do is to get people's attention, which is why we do these talks, which is why we have, an active social media where we educate and we talk about African textile facts. And we want to change people's mindset, because people think that African textiles is just wax. And we're saying, is cotton really the base of it? Or could it be the print? We don't know the answer, but if we throw it out there, then we start having a conversation about it. And I think a lot of the things we're figuring it out. We're still trying to figure out how we're going to get to the point where we produce everything here. Besides the raw material, you need the right technology. You're going to have to build spaces that brings in this technology. Maybe it's not something robust. Maybe it's finding solutions, smaller solutions in these spaces and villages that make textile, so you can make the process a little bit faster. So we're still trying to figure out what's going to be the right way to do this.
All right, and the right entry point. Now, speaking of the right way to do it, we'd like to quantify how adaptive the current society has been to change. Would you maybe guide us through how people have reacted to your business in terms of trying to bring the idea into inception and trying to help people understand, like you've helped me understand, and how that has translated into business?
So we're kind of lucky, because I think Africa is at a moment where we're all so Africanist. We just want what's ours. Yes, this is, and I think we're lucky enough that our project came about in a moment where everybody wants to feel part of this revolution. They want to own the things. So when we tell them, guys, the textiles that you're buying, it's not that they're not ours because we've adopted them, so of course they're ours. They're part of our identity. I have textiles, African textiles, Capulana, that my great-grandmother has given me, and she has a whole case, wooden case this big of textiles that is part of our heritage. And one day when she leaves, she already told us, you're going to get this. So it's part of my history as well. She has stories about that. But it's about saying, okay, that's there and it's beautiful. Let's start making our own. Let's reclaim that. Even the ones that's already been created, let's bring it back. Let's give it another touch, which is our view. And we're from here, so we know what the stories are. So I think it's been a little bit easy for us, and I feel like we're cheating a little bit, because people are thirsty for these kinds of things. They're thirsty for these kinds of ideas, and they had no idea that this was the context, or that how these textiles came to be. They just know that it's something that is part of us. Because if you look at the traditional way that African textiles are printed, the wax prints, the minimums for that is 3,000 meters. No young designer is going to print 3,000 meters for his collection. But young designers want their own custom prints. So what we say to them is, okay, our solution is not cheap, but we can give you customized digital prints. We can give you customized screen printing.
When you say not cheap, what do we mean?
I would say a meter of printing could be anywhere from $10 to $25. So definitely not cheap. And And of course, if I was doing 3,000 meters, I could reduce that. Because if you compare, when we try to do our price point to what we're going to do, a capulana costs about 250 meticais. Trying to think about the rand value to that, I would say about 20, 30 rand, maybe. And one of ours is going to cost at least 200, 300 rand, at least. You know, and it's tough. It's a tough margin, but you know, hopefully because there's a story behind it, and there's a whole concept and design to it. So we're bringing a print that is authentically African. That it's a different kind of niche market, but our goal is to find partners and find ways to make sure that this idea is not just for a niche, but the ladies who are the true capulana wearers, who are wearing this every day as part of their wardrobe, can also have access to that, because I think they would be really excited to know, hey, this was designed by some girl who lives in a village that she can name. Right?
Right. Let's talk about the kind of investors that are interested. Ordinarily, when you mention textile, the number one country that comes to mind is China, because they've heavily come into the market and said, we have our own, whether legitimate or not, we can provide textile to some case or leather. So guide us through what kind of investors have been coming to you, or partners with possible ideas on how you could further your business.
So interestingly enough, one of the interests so far has been from the Turkish. They are right now trying to invest a lot of money into the textile industry in Mozambique, and what we were told is that we are the only textile startup that they know of. So there are not a lot of people doing things around textile. So we're still having a conversation of what that means. How would that be possible? Or what, you know, how do you make that happen? How do you make that true? And the thing, you know, the biggest fear and the question everybody asks us is, how do you compete with China? And my answer is we don't, because we can't. And the only way that we've become competitive is because what we're doing is too labor intensive for China. The Chinese don't want to tell stories. They want to make money. So this is how we make our space relevant, is because we're doing something that they have no interest in doing. And the danger will be that, of course, in a few years, some of our prints will be copied in China. The way that we see the scaling of our business is, one, that we want to exist on an online platform. And our idea is that we will create a platform, and it will be a digital marketplace for African prints. So as an African textile designer from anywhere in Africa, you can open an online store and sell your designs. And then the person will choose whether they want to print it in, I don't know, in cotton, in silk, in wallpaper. And then that's not in our control, because then it becomes something bigger. And the third stage that we envision for our project is that we will create textile innovation labs that could be replicable all through Africa. So imagine putting textile innovation labs in villages around Africa, where young people, textile artisans, have access to this new technology, and they're creating their own textiles. They're creating their own language.
Most of the consumers within your industry are more of a feel before they buy. How do you work that out if it's on a digital platform?
ASOS existed in London first, and they just said, they made a promise, same-day delivery, and that was their promise. And they did that, and they had a great return policy. So you need to look at the models that already exist and work, and say, all right, if we want to do a digital platform, I don't start with 100 countries. I start with Maputo, and I see how people respond, and I get the user experience, and from that, I decide how I grow. So I don't decide how my platform is going to go. You guys are going to decide what works.
All right. My final question has to do with, we have the misconception or the notion that tailors are designers or designers are tailors.
In Africa, we have a big problem, which is we don't understand value chains. There's one person who's a designer, and there's one person who's a technician. Okay, and this is the language that we need to change. So there's a designer, which is the guy who comes up with the idea, and he then puts that into practice with the help of a technician, who's the tailor. Unless we understand that those are two very different places, there's no way that we're going to grow. And this is a struggle that I go through all the time, because I tell my guys, we exist in synergy. You cannot do what I do, and I can't do what you do. But best believe, you can copy my designs and do them. But if I walk away, you will innovation will stop because the ideas come from here. I'm the designer. I create. You make. You're the maker. And there's value in both. But for some reason in Africa, we have given designing more of a platform than the person who makes. So they feel the need to label themselves creatives, and they don't value the workmanship that is to make a garment. Garment creation is a science. And for you to be able to scale that, you need to be a good technician. You need to understand measurements. You need to know how to do patterns. You need to know that for me to make 100 shirts like that, I don't just look at it. There is an exact measurement from here to here that tells me if it's a small, a large, an extra large, this is how it should be. And if we understood the technical complexity of that, then the people who make our clothes would feel a bit more valued because they would understand that they are doing something scientific. It's called garment engineering. It's not an art, it's a science.